One of my goals for the end of June is to tackle the Goodreads Spring 2026 TBR Challenge. Yes, I'm coming back to this after just missing out on completing the Winter Challenge. Now, I made a pretty noble attempt and I only had a couple of achievements left as of the end of March, so I just narrowly missed out. However, I know I want to have a go at completing this at least once at some point, so I'm going to have a stab at the Spring Challenge. Now, on my blog, I shared a post the other day about where I'm up to with this challenge, and so far I have 4 out of the 12 achievements. So that means I have a little bit of a way to go, but I think it's achievable. Now, what I've done in that blog post and what I'm going to share with you today are some examples of books on my reading list that I can pick up that will contribute towards this challenge. Now, I turned out pretty lucky in that I think there were only a couple of achievements, if you like, where I didn't already have a book on my TBR. So, for the most part, I'm able to carry on ticking off books off my list as normal. The priority obviously maybe has changed a little bit because I'm picking these up for this challenge, but I'm not salty about it. There are some books on this list that I've actually been really looking forward to getting to anyway, and bumping them up the list is not going to be a problem as far as I'm concerned. I think there were 2 achievements towards the end of the challenge where I didn't have a book that naturally fit on my TBR. Now, I have instead gone to have a look at books that will fulfill that prompt that I am maybe interested in but hadn't added to my list, and I have come up with a few. One of those challenges has 2 books, and the last challenge actually has one of those books from the previous challenge, so I may pick up this one to achieve the 2 depending on timing. But more on that later. For now, let's take a recap on the achievements I do have so far, and then I can get into what the remaining prompts are and what books I have in scope to pick up towards these. So, in terms of achievements I've attained so far, I already have Page Turner, Speed Reader, and Book Boss. Each of those are to read a total number of books during the challenge, Page Turner being 2, Speed Reader being 3, and Book Boss being 5. Now, I've achieved those through picking up books I naturally want to read throughout April and May so far, and it's good that I've managed to get that many given that I've not had particularly great reading progress so far. But we're there, that's good. The only other one achievement I have so far was I read a trending book. Now, I achieved this by picking up The Astral Library by Kate Quinn, and I did that naturally as part of my reading kind of 2026 releases coming out. There are more of those to come, and I will link that video if you want to go and check out what those are later this year. I have a couple of books that I want to get to pretty soon that came out in April in order to kind of keep on top of these. Now, let's take a look at what I have left to achieve and some of the books on my TBR that will help me get there. The first achievement that I still have yet to complete is Community Picks. Now, I had a poke through the eligible books for this award, and I found 3 that are on my TBR already. Those are The Whisper Man, Behind Closed Doors, and Fool Me Once. I like the sound of all of these books, and rather than commit myself to any particular one of these as of right now, I want to keep my options open. I pretty equally want to pick all of these up. I have no burning desire to read one over the other. So I'm just going to keep things open, see what I fancy, and pick up one of these depending on whatever mood takes me when I get to this one. Next, we have Marathon Reader. Now, this reading prompt is to pick up a book of I can't remember if there has a set page count, but basically it's a chunky book. Now, we all know I have plenty of those on my reading list, so I didn't struggle with finding a prompt for this one. Now, I have 5 books that I've kind of provisionally earmarked that I could read towards this challenge. Those are Jane Eyre, Lord of the Rings, The Pillars of the Earth, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and finally Wolf Hall. Now, I want to read all of these books. There are some I am maybe more naturally inclined to read more than others. For example, I really want to do a Lord of the Rings kind of reread at some point, so that's definitely a strong contender for the list. However, there are at least one of these books that are on my fixed reading list for 2026 that I set out in my 2026 resolutions. So, whilst I'm not going to fully commit myself, I'm leaning towards picking up The Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett for this challenge. That is the book that is on my fixed 2026 list, but I've also been recommended it by at least 2 work colleagues, and I think I'm going to really enjoy it. So again, not going to fully solidly commit myself, but that's where I'm leaning. Next, we come on to editors' picks, and again I had a few books that meet this prompt. The 4 books that I have provisionally kind of flagged on my TBR that work towards this challenge are The Will of the Many, The Wager, Challenger, and The Song of the Cell. Now again, these are all books I want to read, but there are a couple I am debating between. I read Orbital by Samantha Harvey at the beginning of this year, and one of the topics that this very short book touches on is what happens to Space Shuttle Challenger. Now, this book I'd already purchased sort of towards the end of last year, and it was something I knew I wanted to read. It was also written by an author who has written an interesting non-fiction about the Chernobyl disaster, and I really liked that kind of style. So when I saw that he'd written a book about what happened to Challenger, I pretty much picked it up, auto-buy if you like. But having read Orbital and having touched on the subject, I definitely want to read about this soon. So Challenger is probably one of 2 that I'm debating between for this prompt. The second book that I'm debating on, and that was inspired by a recent kind of biology-driven book, is The Song of the Cell. Now, I recently read When We Get Sick, which is a book about kind of what happens on a biological level with insulin resistance and how it can cause like long-term chronic health conditions. But kind of getting into that biological level of things, I was really getting on with that. And The Song of the Cell pretty much kind of does the same thing. Now, I think this is a bit of a broader book as opposed to When We Get Sick, which dedicated itself to a very specific topic. But because I really got on with that lately, The Song of the Cell is high up on my kind of choice list to kind of lean into that. Next, we come on to the Books on Books award, which obviously we have to read a book that includes books. Now, I didn't think originally I had any books on my TBR that fit this, but I did find a couple kind of slightly obscure ones. Now, if I hadn't read Yellowface in January, then this would have been perfect for me, but never mind, I did. Instead, I have a hardback book on my shelf called Inkblood Sister Scribe, which fits the challenge. But also having a poke round, there is a book by Janice Hallett that I'm interested in reading called The Twyford Code that would also fit this achievement. Purely based on logistics and the fact that I own a copy of Inkblood Sister Scribe, this is probably the book I will pick up for this prompt, but I may change my mind. I like to keep my options open, you never know, and given book size or genre or frankly any other factor, I may choose to change my mind. I'm not going to commit myself here and now. But these are 2 solid choices that I could pick up. For this next achievement, which is AAPI Heritage, I actually only have 1 book on my reading list that has been categorised as eligible for this award. And I'm not salty because it's a book by R.F. Kuang, and that is Catabasis. Now, I actually picked this up not long after it came out. I was actually going on holiday, of all things, and I picked it up in my local airport, took it all the way on holiday with me, and brought it all the way back, because I was just that excited to get a copy of it. Thankfully, we were only going away for a few days and suitcase space wasn't particularly at a premium, so I could afford to do that. But again, I'm not mad that this book has come up. I am really looking forward to reading more by R.F. Kuang. And yeah, this is going to be a perfect choice. Her writing style really works for me. So I think this is going to be a solid read regardless. This challenge has thankfully just bumped this book up on my list. So I'm not complaining. The next award is for summer reading, and I must admit, when I saw this headline, I thought I would struggle to find a book. As it happens, I've picked up a number of books that qualify for this challenge. The only problem is I've already picked them up, so unless I were to reread them, they wouldn't apply. And to be honest, they're not the books I want to reread. Instead, this is a prompt where I have gone out to look for an alternative book to read, and the book I have come up with is Andy Weir's Project Hail Mary. There is a second book for this prompt I'm interested in, which is a Game of Thrones kind of story spin-off, so I'm torn when it comes to this reading prompt as to what I want to pick up. You know me, I love a Game of Thrones, and A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is kind of already on my radar. Although, stupidly, I didn't actually officially have it on my TBR. Needless to say, I fixed that. But I'm torn between reading these two. If given the luxury of time and full choice, I will probably pick up A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. However, I do have a bonus in picking up Project Hail Mary, which I'll get onto in just a second. The final fully disclosed award in the Goodreads Spring 2026 Reading Challenge is an Escapist Read Award. Now, the reason Project Hail Mary from the previous prompt has a bonus is that it also applies and I can get the Escapist Reads Award for reading Project Hail Mary here. So, my plan is if I'm pinched on time towards the end of June to complete this award, I will probably pick up Project Hail Mary at least first, if not both, because I will be able to get both awards for that book. If I have the luxury of choice, I will definitely pick up A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms as well to have a book for each prompt, if you like. But I'm not going to be picky. If it comes down to the wire, then I will pick up Project Hail Mary, happily take it for both awards, and call myself done. However, we're not quite done because we have one award left that hasn't fully been disclosed as of recording, but we can make a reasonable guess as to some books that might apply. That reading prompt is based around Pride Month, which is of course taking place in June. Now, I've had a little poke on my TBR for some LGBTQ plus books that could qualify for this award. This award has a bit of a caveat in that I may need to change what I've provisionally selected here as potential eligible books for an actually eligible book to do this. But I have come up with some different ideas for books that I would like to read. And these are Idle Fire, Somewhere Beyond the Sea, and finally The Colour Purple by Alice Walker. Now, as it happens, I have chosen one of these books to listen to in audio format this week. That's because for the rest of my May TBR, I can't get a copy of an audiobook for what I have left to read without costing me money. And I have 3 out of 4 of the remaining books in different formats, so I don't want to spend again, if you like. The other consideration is the final book that I don't have. There isn't an audiobook copy available, so I found myself a bit stumped. But instead, what I'm doing is I have picked up one of these books and hoping really that this qualifies. If it doesn't, it was on my TBR anyway, so not really the end of the world. If nothing else, I'll count it as a win, but obviously if I can make it official, I will absolutely try and make it official, so we'll see what happens. The book I've chosen to read provisionally is Somewhere Beyond the Sea by TJ Klune. It's a sequel to The House in the Cerulean Sea, so naturally I already have an investment in picking up this sequel. Fingers crossed it applies for this award. I will let you know in due course. Those are some books that I'm going to be picking up in the very near future in the hopes that I can complete the Goodreads Spring 2026 Reading Challenge. Hopefully I don't get as close as I did with the Winter Challenge and narrowly miss out again. Otherwise we're going to be back with the next one until I do it. So fingers crossed. Are you having a go at completing the Goodreads 2026 challenge? If so, let me know. Are you going to pick up any of the books that I've mentioned today? Or do you have your own picks contributing towards these challenges that you would like to let me know about? I will, of course, update you on how I get on with these challenges, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye for now.